This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
He's now decided to sentence the president shortly before he is sworn in.
Mike Johnson, officially elected Speaker of the House.
He went to meet with them in the cloakroom. Ecclesiastes.
Alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer.
For the first time in the history of the U.S. Department of Transportation, the agency has fined an airline.
I got to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Good afternoon and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Family Life News anchor Sarah Harnish. Another 2 feet of snow possible near Lakes Erie in Ontario. A wind-whipped deep freeze for the rest of us.
It's cold, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold.
29 for a high today, 20 for a high by Wednesday with wind gusts to 20 and 30 miles an hour. We got your forecast in a couple minutes. We begin with breaking news. The judge in Donald Trump's hush money case in New York is ordering the president-elect to appear for sentencing on January 10th. Legal commenter Jonathan Turley
could not figure out what Mershon was going to do. He's now decided to sentence the president shortly before he is sworn in.
Trump was convicted in 2024 of 34 felonies in a business records case, but the Supreme Court ruled presidents cannot be prosecuted while in office. Turley expects jail time or home confinement will be off the table.
The court may be looking at this and saying, I'm not going to trigger any constitutional problems because I'm going to hand down a sentence that's not going to bind him in any way.
Trump's attorneys can still appeal. It was quite the adventure in the U.S. House today. House Speaker Mike Johnson nearly lost his job.
It was like watching the Sugar Bowl last night. At the beginning, I was yelling at the TV, complaining about all the penalties on Notre Dame and throwing my hands up in exasperation. At the end, they won. I was all happy, all was forgiven. This is beginning. This will be forgotten, but now they have to deliver.
Here's the play-by-play at 2:15 p.m.
There is not a Speaker of the House currently in the United States.
That's right.
House of Representatives.
And then at 3 p.m.
Mike Johnson, officially elected Speaker of the House for the 119th Congress.
The final vote, 218 to 215. Johnson retains his seat after disappearing behind a door with 3 Republican defectors. He was in a cloakroom for a good 30 minutes, and when they emerged, 2 of those votes changed.
Just in terms of Speaker Johnson's method to corral those last few members, he's known as a very polite and gracious guy. The Speaker, as you know, has that beautiful, big, ornate office right off the floor, but he went to meet with them in the cloakroom. And I think that suggests he was treating them with respect and as an equal, not as the Speaker talking down to them.
Fox congressional correspondent Chad Pergram.
The biggest question that everybody's going to want to know right now is what was promised. What was promised there that wasn't promised before? What was that conversation like? Did they have to just make a point?
Johnson's greatest threat, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries, the man that came within 3 votes of taking a seat today. This was Jeffries' speech as he handed the floor to Johnson to lead a second term.
Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, 1st verse, that for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. It's fair to say that in a democracy, there's a time to campaign and a time to govern. The election is over. This is a new Congress. The American people need us as their elected representatives in this season to put down our partisan swords and pick up bipartisan plowshares.
Again, Mike Johnson has been reelected for a second term as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. From the House to the Senate, after 2 campaigns for the U.S. Senate, former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick will be formally sworn in as Pennsylvania's newest senator sometime today. Family Life's Mark Webster has details.
The Republican beat out Democratic incumbent Senator Bob Casey, who had won 6 statewide elections dating back to 1996, including 3 terms in the Senate. Casey lost by 15,000 votes, which triggered an automatic recount across the state. He conceded 2 weeks after Election Day. Prior to entering politics, McCormick served in the Army during the Gulf War and served as CEO of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. Today, he gets a new title, U.S. Senator, on the first day of the 119th Congress. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Jimmy Carter's hometown of Plains, Georgia is getting ready for the first of a series of events for the burial of the former president. This reporter's in Georgia.
Tomorrow morning, a hearse carrying his body will drive to the peanut farm that was his childhood home. A farm bell will toll 39 times for the 39th president.
Carter's state funeral next Thursday at the U.S. Capitol. His remains will be taken back to Georgia for burial. President Biden will go to New Orleans on Monday.
The President and First Lady will grieve with the families and community members impacted by the tragic attack on January 1st and meet with local and state officials on the ground.
14 died in that attack. 30 were injured. The FBI issued a warning last night about potential copycat attacks. Outgoing Surgeon General Vivek Murthy wants to slap a cancer warning on bottles of alcohol across the U.S. Dr. Celine Gounder says it makes sense.
We've known for years now that alcohol increases the risk of breast cancer, but it's also known to increase the risk for mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, colon, and rectal cancer.
Alcohol labels already warn of the risk of birth defects for pregnant women. The government just fined JetBlue for flight delays.
For the first time in the history of the U.S. Department of Transportation, the agency has fined an airline for chronically delayed flights. And we're not just talking about a few late flights. We're talking about delayed flights that were 145 times late between June 2022 and November of 2023.
Delta was found to be on time the most often in the United States. Using their platform for a lot of the players in this year's college football playoffs, Jesus has been the name of the game. Several prominent players have not been shy about their Christian faith in post-game interviews, including Boise State's Ahmed Hassanein.
First, I want to start off and say, glory to Jesus Christ. He's the true champion. Coach D changed my life. I did not know God until I got to Boise State.
Then there was Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard.
What can you say about what this win means to you?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Without him, I wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be here as a whole group.
And Ohio State quarterback Will Howard.
First and foremost, I got to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, for giving me this opportunity to be on this stage and here in the Rose Bowl.
A little Jesus love in football. The college football playoffs continue January 9th with Penn State taking on Notre Dame. Still to come on the 5 o'clock report, temperature drop, tragedy in Brighton, and the Pennsylvania National Guard on guard in D.C. Those stories after weather with Kevin Williams.
Well, travelers, take note. If you're heading into the snow belts, it's going to be some rather rugged travel this weekend, especially the Lake Ontario snow belt in central New York. Outside of lake effect, though, it's just some scattered flurries. For tonight, partly cloudy for most. Lake snows continue southeast of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario. A few inches accumulating in spots there. Low temps, mid-teens into 20s. For the weekend itself, blustery cold. We'll have a mix of clouds and some sunshine in central and eastern Pennsylvania. Elsewhere, mostly cloudy with flurries in areas of heavier lake snow. Weekend high temperatures 20s to near 30.
Thank you, Kevin. Checking the stories, making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania. We're going to lose another 10 degrees over the next few days as we settle into that cold. And then there's the lake belts. WKTV meteorologist Eric Gage in Utica.
That snow is not done with just yet. Heavy snow hitting Oswego in parts of Boonville and central Connecticut County. Those of you in Rome and north, you're the bullseye today.
Wind gusts still about 20 to 30 miles an hour. Tragedy in the Rochester suburb of Brighton today. Police say 2 adults and a child were found dead in what Brighton police chief says is a terrible case of domestic violence. Police were called to the scene around noon, finding one of the victims on the porch and the others inside an adjacent home, all with gunshot wounds. No word yet on a suspect or a motive. Hundreds of Pennsylvania National Guard troops will help provide security for President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration January 20th. Guardsman David Boyle says security is extra tight because of the 2 assassination attempts.
We're very aware, We're very aware. The prior attempts at the incoming president, very aware. We're always in a ready posture, in a ready state.
Sergeant Anthony Varner says for members of the National Guard, soldiering is their second career.
We got construction workers, corrections officers, school teachers, the works, and then when we get that phone call, we just kind of turn that on rather quickly, kind of change mentality from that civilian lifestyle and just turn it on to being a professional soldier.
More than 750 Pennsylvania National Guard members will be in Washington for the inauguration. And it was a patriotic send-off for Buffalo's Connecticut Street Armory for some New York Army National Guard soldiers who are beginning a 10-month deployment to Africa. The soldiers and their families shared their thoughts and their feelings with WKBW.
This is probably the biggest moment. You say your final goodbyes to your family.
It's a culmination of a lot of training and development as well.
It's a good feeling to get to go overseas and prove what we can do and what we're capable of.
I think I feel everything. Nervous, but excited.
I think it's a little surreal still.
A lot of excitement, a lot of patriotism.
There's a lot of pride, a lot of joy. Every day is just another day closer to home.
The soldiers first head to Texas, then to a U.S. base in Djibouti, East Africa. Next at 5, we'll talk with the rural ministry specialist at Grove City College. The Reverend Charlie Cawthorman says the challenges for churches in smaller towns and cities are significant, but these rural congregations have opportunities also to network and to thrive. He sat down with their own Greg Gillespie. Let's listen in.
Your church is going to be contextualized to your community if it's folks from the community who are shaping the vision over years. And I think that's an important thing. If God wanted one big macro corporate church, that's what he would have given us, but he didn't. He gave us relationship first with him and then with others. And so it was always contextualized. And so that's the thing that, local congregations and folks that have been community members over the long haul bring to small churches is this sense of this is the church for this community, and God might call us to do things in a certain way for this specific community. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
What are the biggest issues that are unique to the churches that are part of what you are doing with your ministry of empowering ministry?
If we tell a story that's all about decline, brain drain, and demographic shifts that are in a negative direction, economic scarcity, I think it misses something. The God of the universe is present everywhere, including the smallest town and the most rural village that we can think of. And so if God is present there, there is hope wherever that is. And so I think it's getting people to reimagine what's possible, what the God of the universe might be doing in their midst, and then just joining him in that.
What you're discovering in the churches you work with through the Rural Ministry Center, what's the untold story there?
One of the things that we didn't touch on yet is loneliness. I think loneliness is something that obviously the entire country is dealing with now, that clergy deal with in a special way because of what they have to carry. And then if you are far from other members of the clergy or in other members of your denomination, for instance, the closest pastor in the denomination I serve in is over 2 hours away from where I live in rural northwestern PA. Loneliness is something that you have to be intentional about working against because it will creep in. And so that's one of the reasons why we are doing things with pastor affinity groups, where we're connecting pastors from, southwestern New York, western PA, eastern Ohio, northern West Virginia into these kind of regional affinity groups where they can connect every month or every other month with folks who are doing some of the same things and, share stories and learn from each other, because loneliness is a thing that is very real in the rural church.
You can subscribe, listen to, and share this podcast and all of Family Life's original podcasts at Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org. Time next for tonight's market report, brought to you by Faithward Advisors. Wall Street is closing higher after a volatile start to the new year. At the final bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 339 points to 42,732. The S&P 500 rose 73 points to 59.42, and the NASDAQ climbed 340 points to 19,621. Faithward Advisors is a Christian financial planning firm online at faithwardadvisors.com.
You won't go wrong if you build on the rock. Hi, I'm Rob West with today's Faith and Finance Minute. The start of a year is an excellent time to reflect on what Jesus said about weathering the storms of life. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said the foolish person is the one who disregards his teaching. That's like building a house on sand. When a storm comes, the house will collapse. But the wise person listens to what Jesus says and puts it into practice. When storms come, and they will, that person's house will stand. Much of what Jesus had to say was about money and possessions. This year, resolve to take his words to heart and put them into practice. Then, when the storms of life rage and the winds blow, you'll stand firm. Connect with a certified Kingdom advisor who's been trained to deliver financial advice that aligns with your Christian values by visiting our website, faithfi.com.
Coming up on the 5 o'clock report, loving on the waitress that loved on an autistic customer. A sweet story of kindness after weather with Kevin Williams.
We've got a winter weekend ahead. We'll be shivering. It's cold. Some of us will be shoveling lake effect belts, especially southeast of Lake Ontario. That area in particular is going to see significant additional snow and some very rugged travel. The call for tonight is mostly cloudy. We'll have flurries and lake snows. The focus will be again southeast of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Low temps dropping toward 20. And over the weekend, blustery cold, sun and clouds and flurries, heavy lake snows southeast of Lake Erie and especially southeast of Lake Ontario. The high temperature both weekend days, 25 to 30.
All right, Kevin, finally at 5, Jesus is the light of the world, and a kind-hearted waitress is in the spotlight after shining light into a customer's dark day. Ashley Polistrini brought her kids, some of whom are autistic, to a Washington pizza place, and it wasn't going well. But waitress Amber Bryant, who has an autistic child of her own, brought a side of snacks and encouragement along with the order.
She didn't know that we had just moved out of our house, and I'm taking my kids by myself places, and it's hard and it's stressful. I know that moment.
That kindness got noticed by a customer who crowdsourced a gift of cash and gift cards for Bryant in appreciation.
Light attracts light. Put a lot of light out into the world, and so right now people need that.
Ashley and Amber say they're now not just waitress and customer, but friends, and the viral video has generated donations to local autism services. And that is the world that we live in for Friday, the 3rd of January. I'm Sarah Harnish, and this is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.